Well, it's March and election season is underway in Europe. This month we have the elections in the Netherlands, and in late April and May we have the elections in France. And never before has everyone been watching this so closely, because we're waiting to see if the whole Brexit Trump wave is going to continue and what it's going to look like for the future of the European Union. So what I have here is the chart for the Netherlands. Now, there are quite a few different charts for the Netherlands. There was one for the time of the Utrecht Treaty, when the Netherlands split from Belgium. There's another when William I returned from exile in England to Holland. And this particular one is for when William I takes the throne. And so you can see Holland is a Pisces, and there are a whole lot of planets in Pisces, right up there in the 10th house. You've got Sun, Mercury, Venus, all in Pisces in the 10th there. Now, that tells you a lot about the Netherlands. What do we know? It's a country that, most of the country is below sea level. It's been reclaimed from the sea in the main. Even their airport, Schiphol, the grave of ships, is part of land reclaimed from the sea. So it's quite appropriate, this link to Pisces. Plus the fact that Holland was a seafaring nation. They had colonies, Jan van Riebeck, who went off to South Africa, also colonies in Indonesia and in the Caribbean. So very much a colonial power represented by those planets in the 10th house, and seafaring. What else does it say? Well, not only are there all those planets in Pisces in the 10th house, the Sun in Pisces is square Neptune, which is the ruler of Pisces, in Sagittarius. And that also tells me about the progressive policy that Holland has been known for in terms of drugs, prostitution, euthanasia, abortion. They really do have some very liberal policies in terms of that. And Neptune in Sagittarius really epitomised this liberal thinking. And right up until 2002, 2004, when things started to change, they also had a very liberal immigration policy, and were really encouraging people from all over to come on in to the Netherlands. You'll see there that the moon is in Taurus, which is also appropriate because agriculture is a major part of the Netherlands economy. They are only second to America in terms of the percentage of the economy that their agricultural output amounts to. Now you have there Jupiter, the planet of expansion, everything big, that's down there in the 4th house. And Holland is the most densely populated country in Western Europe, and certain areas of Holland are populated so densely they're in comparison with places like Bangladesh, South Korea and Taiwan. So that Jupiter down there in the 4th signifies this cramming of people into this particular area. And it also tells us that it's a resource-rich country. So there are Holland has oil fields, including the Groningen gas field, which is one of the largest in the world. So that's a big part of their economy. And there are also other huge natural gas reserves that they have access to. So I think that's symbolized there by Jupiter. Now, with Mars being in the 7th house, it shows an eagerness to cooperate, and also with the planets in the 10th, an eagerness to play a role in world affairs. So we know that Holland is the Netherlands is a founding member of NATO, the World Trade Organization, the European Union. They were first into the euro currency as well. So they definitely are a country that enjoys cooperating with other countries, working in tandem with other countries, as indicated by Mars over there in the 7th. What else can we say about it? Okay, I think I've got everything there. They also, of course, Moon in Taurus, are very interested in environmentalism and sustainability. So I think this chart really gives a nice snapshot of some of the themes of modern Holland. So let's see what's going on at the moment. And there are quite a few interesting transits and arcs, many of them involving Pluto. So let's first look at the transits. Pluto is right now transiting, and it will very soon be conjunct Mars, that planet we talked about in the 7th house. So that says to me a shake-up in the treaties and the kind of relationship Holland is wishing to have. It says to me possibly what Geert Wilders is talking about, taking Holland out of Schengen as a start. But what else does it mean? In the past, Mars has been activated by Pluto before. Once was in 1929, of course, the time of the stock market crash. And that is interesting to me because I see this theme in the chart of America and also in Italy, that we might possibly be heading for really serious economic times this year. And that is highlighted there. Another time when Pluto was conjuncting Mars. Now Mars is often the planet linked with violence, especially when it is in the 7th house. Could possibly be linked to terrorism as we look forward in this, look forward into 2017. But the time before, when it was linked, there was a gunman in a shopping mall who killed 6 people, wounded 11. So that was a kind of national event. And another time that it happened was when the El Al jet slammed into a block of flats in Amsterdam. So that is sometimes associated with accident or disaster. So we could be looking at something like that in the coming year. What else does Pluto mean? Now, I'm very interested in this particular position of Mars around about 19 Capricorn, because at the beginning of the European Union, the planets Uranus and Neptune were conjunct on around 17-18 Capricorn. So at the formation of the European Union under the Maastricht Treaty, which is the chart I use for the beginning of the European Union, that particular planet Mars in Holland's chart was activated. So the fact that it's being activated again now, and this time by Pluto, says to me there's been a cycle, because what I see these planets of Neptune and Uranus, when they came together in conjunction at the beginning of the EU, I see that as the start of the ball really getting going on the whole neoliberal agenda, globalism, and the formation of these big trade blocks and power blocks. And we know now that whole thing has hit a stumbling block, especially with Trump coming in, and the fact that in Holland's chart, Pluto is now knocking onto Mars, which was being activated at the beginning of the EU, says we've come to the end of the cycle, starting something new, shows to me that Holland might be wanting to reform their whole relationship with the EU. Now, in terms of all the solar arcs, we see that solar arc Moon is square Pluto. Moon's always important because it's one of the luminaries. So when it is forming an arc to a major planet like Pluto, especially as Pluto is the most elevated planet, it says to us something important is going on. So when you've got the Moon and Pluto together, we're seeing populism. We're seeing mass opinion sort of galvanizing in a certain direction. So that tells to me that a momentum is definitely building up ahead of steam in the country of Holland, where people are looking to make some changes in the direction that the country's taking. Also, we have the solar arc Sun is square Mars. So once again, Mars in the 7th house, Holland's relationship with other countries is coming into the treaties with other countries is coming to the forefront. We also have solar arc Venus being square to Saturn. Saturn's up there in the 8th house. Saturn was being activated at the time when the Holland went into the Euro, and I see that Saturn is symbolizing the relationship Holland has within the Euro. Now, one of the things that Geert Wilders wants to do is to bring Holland out of the Euro. So with Saturn being activated, I don't think that is off the cards. It certainly is a possibility, and again it indicates to me slight austerity, and shows to me again that this whole worldwide thing in 2017, where things are going to be getting a lot more tough financially, it reminds me of that. So when the Sun was last activating, now I was just going to say how the Moon is now activating Pluto. When the Sun was last activating Pluto was during Maastricht, so again a link to Mars, and also when they made the decision to go into the Euro. So again we have this cyclical thing of when Pluto was activated before going into Maastricht, and now a major question mark concerning Holland's future in the Euro. Because Pluto being in the 10th house, that's all about the leadership. And when it's been activated in the past was when Queen Juliana abdicated and gave way to Queen Beatrix. And so that shows you a change in rulership in the country for the head of state. But now when Pluto is being activated, I'm thinking that there can be almost a constitutional crisis. Because with Geert Wilders, although he may end up getting, as I'm going to talk about his chart next, a large proportion of the votes and may get as many as 29 seats, that's not enough for him to form a majority, because he would need at least more than 35 seats to do that in Holland's system. So what's going to happen? None of the other parties want to form an alliance with him, so we're going to have someone who's got the majority, more seats than any of the other parties, and yet he can't form a government because there can't be an alliance. And I think that is going to result in a very unstable coalition being formed with the other parties, something that's not sustainable, and something that's going to create a kind of, like I say, a crisis in terms of the rulership of the country. So I don't think that after this election it'll be cut and dry. We're going to be entering a period where Holland is under uncertainty, because the coalitions that are forming are not able to effectively govern because they can't hold together, and it would be impossible for Geert Wilders to form a coalition of his own But on the other hand, he's going to be on the sidelines with a lot of power because of all the votes he has in order to make the changes that he sees necessary. So, one of the other things I wanted to talk about in Holland's chart, yes. So, okay, where did we get to? I think we'll take a look at Geert Wilders' chart now, because it's quite interesting to see how he figures in with this whole thing. So, Geert Wilders was, he is Virgo. His birthday is the 6th of September, 1963. There's no really set birth time that I can rely on, so I won't be concentrating too much on the planets on their angles, because I'm not quite sure if this birth time I have for him is accurate. He has there, if you can see my chart, he's got the Sun, Venus, Pluto and Uranus all in Virgo, and also the Moon and Jupiter in Aries. Reminds me a little bit of Michael Gove's chart, because he also had the stellium of planets in Virgo. Also reminds me of Nigel Farage, who had a very strong Aries Virgo influence in his chart. Now, Geert Wilders, one of his first jobs was working in health insurance, which I think that maps in very well with all these planets in Virgo, because it's about health and admin. And the Moon conjunct Jupiter, well, his father's Dutch, but his mother was from Dutch Indonesia, was from of Indonesian background, from the Dutch colony in Indonesia. So that shows Moon being conjunct to Jupiter in Aries, the foreign blood running through him. And it also gave him a wanderlust, which caused him, when he was very early on, in his youth, to go travelling. Now, he wanted to go all the way to Australia, but he couldn't afford it. So he landed up in Israel, where he stayed for a long time, working and earning money to travel throughout the Arab world while he was there. And it seems that that period in his life was very important in forming his political opinions, especially when it came to Islam, because he was concerned about the lack of democracy in those countries, and he began to see that there was a very politicized branch of Islam, which he saw as being a potential problem, and I think that feeds into his philosophy. So the Moon being conjunct in Jupiter shows that his political philosophy was formed during an early stage in his life. It also shows that he is very much a conviction politician. I feel a lot of politicians are there, it's a job, they've got themselves in, the money's quite good, they're looking forward to earning a fortune when they leave politics in industry or on speaking tours. But with Mr. Wilders, this Moon conjunct Jupiter up in Aries says he's very passionate. He has very, very strong ideas. He could be seen, he's almost on a personal crusade, but he is fired up with his ideas and he wants to carry them through. Now, I believe that he has had numerous death threats against him, which is quite interesting, because in 2002, 2004, some right-wing Dutch politicians, Pim Fortuyn and Theo van Gogh, were assassinated. So there's definitely a possibility in Dutch politics that politicians on the far right can be assassinated, which is why Wilders is very cautious. In fact, his office is at the far extreme of the Dutch Parliament, down the end of a long corridor at the very far reaches of the building, so that he's most easily protected there. He sleeps in a different place every night. He only sees his wife about once a week because the security concerns for him are so big. In his chart, he does have a square between Saturn and Neptune. Now, this is a bit of definitely a sign of a possibility of assassination, while the conjunction between those planets is usually a lot more certain. The fact that they're at square in his chart does show a possibility, so he does need to be careful. And I say that as well because Pluto is coming up to conjunct his south node on March the 11th, and that is definitely a point where he needs to be more concerned. But it does show to me that his power base and his the way he's tapping into the populism, into the vibe, is increasing at that point, which leads me to believe he is definitely going to get the most votes. I don't think the polls are wrong in this case. We've seen with Trump they were way underestimated, and with Brexit. But in the case of Geert Wilders, I do think he's going to be picking up the majority of the votes, will have the majority of the seats, because his chart looks so good. He also has Neptune opposite Sun conjunct Venus. Now, I'm always a little bit concerned when Neptune is around in a chart, because it tends to indicate disappointment, and it also can be subversion and underhand tactics. The people that are out to get him will do absolutely anything that's necessary. But as we've seen, and I've talked about in a lot of my charts, Neptune is always active when politicians win an election or a seat to high office, because Neptune is the way they are tapping in to the common unconscious, you know, the collective unconscious of people, tapping into the vibe, tapping into the feelings. And when Neptune's there, it means they're doing that successfully. And because voting is such a collective thing that captures the imagination or inspires people on a mass level in a country like no other no other event would, because so many people participate. The fact that Neptune is active seems to me always a sign that the person's going to do pretty well. Plus the fact that his solar arc Jupiter is square Sun. Now Jupiter's a very influential and positive planet in his chart, indicates politics, power, the passion he has. Moon being natally conjunct Jupiter in Aries, which is a very forceful, powerful force, shows to me again that the stars are definitely with him in terms of getting a lot of votes. If you are to believe the time that they've given for this particular chart, then Jupiter conjunct Moon is on the midheaven as well, the chart of success, of power, of leadership. So that's all looking good, plus the fact that the solar arc nodes are conjunct Sun, conjunct Venus. Another indication of taking power, a leadership role, having a fair amount of luck, and tapping into the public eye, which politicians need to do. So I think that it looks particularly good for Geert Wilders. I see he says he doesn't really associate with Marine Le Pen because he doesn't agree with her brand of far-right. He sees himself as a far-right liberal, and I'm thinking possibly because Mercury and Mars are in Libra. That's why he sees him in that sense. Although I must say, out of the three, out of sort of all the four, Trump, Farage, Le Pen and Wilders, I would have said he was probably the most extreme in his views. He doesn't see himself that way. He just sees himself as far-right and liberal. His main aims are take Holland out of the EU, take them out of Schengen, number one, and take them out of the Euro. Now, on taking them out of the Schengen and out of the Euro, I definitely think there are possibilities there. In terms of coming out of the European Union completely, I think we'll have to wait until Uranus is more active in this chart, in the Netherlands chart, which is going to be in 5 years' time. It's definitely not a possibility. Between the chart of Holland and France, which I've got a vlog coming up on, I think it's far more likely Netherlands is going to be the one to split. They have a far greater sense of their own identity, as indicated by these planets in the 10th house. They want to play a more global role, be on the global stage. They see themselves, nationalism, it's definitely a bigger feature. When I come to France's chart, you'll see that they are a country that really like to be in this kind of union. I think it'll be a lot harder for Marine Le Pen to pull France out. I think when push comes to shove, France are more likely to want to stay in. I really don't think, if push comes to shove, the Netherlands aren't going to. And I see that they are going to begin a course soon where they'll be looking to change that relationship with the EU. If they can't change it, they'll be looking to exit, and that's going to be starting because, of course, Pluto, the planet of change, you saw it was so active in the United Kingdom's chart during Brexit. Although it's much harder for Geert Wilders because there's going to be a lot of changes and turmoil in governing the country now, because it's going to be hard to form that power coalition. Now, another planet that was activated when I looked at the chart of the Netherlands was Venus. We've also talked about Mars being activated, and when the whole far-right movement started back in 2002 and 2004, those planets, Mars and Venus, were activated, and Mars and Venus were also activated when Theo van Gogh was assassinated. So again, Geert Wilders can't afford to overlook that possibility, because the powers that be might seem as too much of a threat to the whole agenda that's been set up over so many years. And so I don't say that is, well, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's definitely something that he needs to guard against. And there was one more interesting thing I wanted to say, yes. Oh, another time when Pluto was activated was when William III died and gave over power to Queen Wilhelmina. So you can see changes in the power structure at the top of Holland royalty or Holland politics are often signified by these transits or arcs when Pluto is activated. So Pluto, big changes to come with the Netherlands. I think things look positive for Geert Wilders, playing a major role in politics, doing well in this election and taking that momentum forward. I don't think public opinion in Holland is going to be shifting anytime soon. I think the tide's turned, and the way the planets are looking in the next few years, it seems like momentum is going to be building very strongly to getting out of Schengen firstly, getting out of the Euro, and then finding another role, a global role for Holland. That's great. I think I've covered everything I wanted to say and covered everything about all our friends and yeah. Absolutely. So I think that's everything covered in terms of how the planets are looking. And I'll be watching the election. I think it's going to be taking place around March 15th. So you know, obviously he needs to be careful, Geert Wilders, but there's definitely going to be a lot exciting happening in Holland. Out of Holland and France, this is the one that I think we need to watch a lot more in terms of making their own place, finding their own place in the world again.